Russian president announces ongoing tests and serial production of Orshnik missile. French President Emmanuel Macron and US President Joe Biden stressed the need to restore peace and security in the Middle East. And the United Nations agencies raise alarm over the escalating humanitarian crisis in Lebanon. Good evening, and you're now watching Q News, and we begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Russia and Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced that his country would continue testing the hypersonic Orshnik missile fired at Ukraine the previous day, and begin its serial production. Putin emphasized that the missile could not be intercepted, stating that there are currently no countermeasures or interception systems worldwide. He reiterated the importance of ongoing tests and the establishment of serial production for the new missile system. Russia's claimed that its forces attacked targets including Ukraine's military industrial enterprises, energy facilities and military airfields over the past week. On the other side, Ukraine reported that its forces repelled Russian attacks and shot down dozens of Russian drones. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the Russian military had taken control of multiple settlements over the past week, noting that the Russian Air Defense Forces intercepted missile, rockets, aerial bombs and drones launched from the Ukrainian side. The governor of Russia's Kursk region has announced that the return of 46 civilian residents, including 12 children, held by Ukraine. Alexei Smirnov stated that the civilians had been taken into Ukraine by Ukrainian troops during a cross-border incursion into the Kursk region in August. The release followed negotiations between Moscow and Kiev. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov has announced that his government is enhancing air defense capabilities in response to Russia's ballistic missiles attack on the city of Dnipro. Speaking at a joint media briefing with Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson in Stockholm, Umerov emphasized Ukraine's commitment to bolstering its defense. Johnson reiterated Sweden's unwavering support for Ukraine despite the latest Russian assault.
We've seen throughout this war that Russia systematically is attacking your critical infrastructure, civilian targets as well.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has stated that the best way to protect peace in Europe is by supporting Ukraine's right to self-defense. She was responding to questions about Germany's reconsidering its stance on allowing Ukraine to use German missiles following Russia's use of newly developed missiles to strike Ukrainian targets. Baerbock accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of using these advanced missiles to pressure Europe into halting its support for Ukraine.
With explosive materials which are supposed to go on our airplanes, and we are faced.
The Kremlin has condemned new US sanctions on Russia's Gazprom Bank, calling them an attempt to hinder Russia gas exports. The sanctions prevent Gazprom Bank from processing energy-related transactions involving the U.S. financial system, ban trade with Americans, and freeze its U.S. assets. The government also stated that it would work to find a solution to the measures. A United States missile strikes key Russian targets and boosts Ukraine's moral amid challenges and international reactions. So what is the ATACMS? And for more analysis, we now move to Mark, who is in our newsroom. Mark.
Thank you very much, Marna. So for more on the current situation between Russia and Ukraine, we are joined from Moscow by the writer and political researcher, Dr. Rami Al-Kaloubi. Thank you very much for being with us and welcome to Q News. So what do you make of these recent Russian strikes against Ukraine using these long-range missiles?
Actually, this missile launch is on sort of a message to the West, because this Oreshnik missile is able to achieve any goal in Europe, and it's quite hard to prevent it from achieving the goal because it's supersonic. So now the message is that we are ready to move on the stair of escalation. We don't wish that. So let's achieve some agreement on Ukraine.
And do you think the new Russian strikes will change the dynamics of the war in Ukraine?
What will change the war in Ukraine is the inauguration of the new president, or an elected president, Donald Trump, in January. But for the moment, the goal is to make sure that the West understands the Russian red lines. During the last few years, the West provided HIMARS missiles and Abrams tanks and F-16 aircraft for Ukrainian forces, and Russia did nothing. So the West got the impression that he can continue to provide Ukraine with the most modern weapons, and Russia will do nothing. But the last point for Russia was when the United States, France, and the UK gave a green light to Ukraine to use missiles to strike Russian territory. So at that moment, Russia announced that modification of nuclear doctrine, and after that, Russia had to prove that by some move on the stairs of escalation. Of course, without achieving the highest step, which is the use of nuclear weapons, but the message is clear for the West.
And things have certainly, as you mentioned, things have certainly escalated. Do you think there's any chance that this war could extend beyond the borders of Ukraine and into Europe?
I don't think so, because actually the West is ready to fight with Russia with Ukrainian soldiers' hands, but the Western countries and societies will never accept to send their own soldiers to Ukrainian territory, because actually these countries in the West, they have a political model of liberal democracy, which makes possible to change the authorities through elections. And in case if there some European soldiers are killed in Ukraine, this will be a political end and no political future for the current leaders in Europe. And there are some Russian experts say that now there is a state of strategic parasitism in Europe because Europe had not witnessed any serious wars since 8 decades. So now they start to treat wars like a computer game on some other territory. But at the moment they feel that Russia can achieve them, they will reconsider their politics. This is what Russia hopes to achieve now.
And so how will Western powers like Europe and the United States, how will they respond, do you think, to these new Russian strikes?
At the moment, I think they will provide more weapons for Ukraine, and this is quite expected because now the Biden administration is in some sort of rail with time before Trump comes to the White House to make for him difficult to change politics. But on the long run, of course, when Trump, who is a businessman more than a politician, of course, when he arrives to the White House, he will suggest some deal that would include Ukraine. But however, there is a risk that he will not be able to win or achieve a victory upon the American deep states, which is unified in its animosity towards Russia. So, however, to be honest, we cannot be sure that Trump will end the war immediately.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. That was the writer and political researcher, Dr. Rami Al-Kaloubi. Thank you very much for being here on Q News. And it's back to you, Mona.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, for the analysis. And now we move to the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
French President Emmanuel Macron and US President Joe Biden have stressed the urgent need to restore peace and security in the Middle East. In a phone call on Friday, the Élysée Palace reported that the two leaders underscored the importance of achieving a ceasefire in both Gaza and Lebanon. Focusing on Lebanon, France and the United States are closely coordinating efforts to secure a truce along the Blue Line. The aim is to facilitate the safe return of the displaced people to their homes in line with UN Security Council Resolution 1701 while reaffirming Lebanon's sovereignty. United Nations agencies have raised alarm over the escalating humanitarian crisis in Lebanon. At a press conference in Geneva, officials from the World Health Organization, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and the UN Office for the Coordination of the Humanitarian Affairs highlighted the worsening situation as Israeli military operations in Lebanon persist. They stressed growing uncertainty and fear among the Lebanese population as the crisis deepens.
And its people in decades.
Israeli forces have struck a residential building in Beirut's Basta neighborhood, killing 15 people and injuring 63 as rescue efforts continue. Israeli media claimed the attack targeted a building housing Hezbollah's head of operations, Mohammed Haidar. Meanwhile, Lebanese media reported that the strike reduced the building to rubble and caused extensive damage to nearby structures. An Israeli airstrike has hit a beach in Tyre, southern Lebanon, killing 2 and injuring 1. Earlier today, Israeli strike targeted Beirut's southern suburbs after a morning evacuation alert. An unannounced strike also hit Beirut's Basta neighborhood, causing significant destruction. Israeli occupation forces have launched a new wave of airstrikes in Beirut's southern suburbs, shortly after issuing evacuation orders to residents of Hadath and Burj al-Barajna. The orders announced by the Israeli Army Arabic spokesperson on Platform X marked the second warning of the day, urging citizens to evacuate immediately and move at least 500 meters away. And now we move to the latest developments in Gaza. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell has reaffirmed that the European governments, including those aspiring to join the bloc, cannot pick and choose whether to execute arrest warrants issued by an international tribunal against Israeli leaders. He pointed out that such obligations are not optional for EU members, and any refusal would constitute a violation of legal commitments. Borrell also rejected accusations that the ICC's arrest warrants were anti-Semitic, asserting that criticism of Israeli government policies should not be equated with anti-Semitism.
But it is an obligation for member states. The candidate to become member of the European Union.
Gazan health authorities have confirmed that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7th has risen to over 44,100, with more than 104,400 individuals injured. This comes after the Israeli occupation forces committed 7 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours, which resulted in the killing of at least 120 Palestinians and the injury of 205 others. Five Palestinians have been killed and others have been injured in the occupation shelling of Beit Lahia and Al-Bureij, north and central Gaza Strip. Palestinian media also reported that at least 22 citizens were killed as a result of the occupation's shelling of homes in Gaza City, Al-Nusayrat camp and Qnews last night. Israeli occupation forces have detained at least 15 Palestinians from various spots of West Bank during a series of overnight raids. These recent detentions bring the total number of Palestinians detained since the beginning of the ongoing Israeli aggression to over 11,700, including those arrested from both the West Bank and Jerusalem. Two Palestinians have been killed and others injured in an Israeli airstrike that targeted Kamal Adwan Hospital in the town of Beit Lahia, north of the Gaza Strip. Palestinian media reported that the occupation forces targeted a gathering of citizens at the northern gate of the hospital, which has been subjected to continuous bombing since last night, which has led to the injury of nearly 12 medical personnel in the Israeli attacks since then. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, accusing them of war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Gaza war.
The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, accusing them of crimes against humanity and war crimes committed during the war on Gaza. The charges include the use of starvation as a weapon of war, deliberate attacks on civilians, and violations of international humanitarian law. The United Kingdom, a signatory to the Rome Statute, has indicated its readiness to comply with its legal obligations under international law. A spokesperson for Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirmed the United Kingdom's adherence to responsibilities, though they refrained from commenting on whether Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu would face arrest. Similarly, Canada has affirmed its compliance, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau emphasizing the importance of upholding international law. Hungary, in stark contrast, has dismissed the ICC's jurisdiction and invited Netanyahu for an official visit. The United States has also rejected the warrants, with President Joe Biden denouncing the ICC's decision as outrageous and reiterating Washington's steadfast support for Israel. Other nations, including Ireland, Belgium, and the Netherlands, have expressed their intent to enforce the ICC rulings, potentially complicating Netanyahu's international travel.
Mr. Trump takes his place among the great anti-Semites in modern times.
The ICC decision extends beyond political leaders, targeting Israeli military personnel involved in the war on Gaza. International activists have gathered detailed evidence on individuals implicated in the crimes. Recent legal actions in countries like Belgium and Cyprus demonstrate how this information is being leveraged to uphold perpetrators accountable. The warrants have heightened scrutiny of Netanyahu's leadership, sparking concerns about his ability to govern amid increasing international isolation. Legal experts suggest that the ICC's decision may influence other legal actions, such as arms embargoes, and could mark a significant shift in global accountability for war crimes.
And now we move to the latest developments in the United States.
We can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America, and indeed the whole world. This is a magnificent victory for the American people. Promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again.
President-elect Donald Trump has tapped Ross Vought, a key figure behind Project 2025, as director of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Vought, OMB chief, during Trump's first term, would shape budget priorities and drive efforts to expand presidential power, cut regulations, and enforce conservative policies. Project 2025 proposes reclassifying federal jobs to ease termination, restricting abortion pill shipments, and eliminate the Department of Education. Trump's team includes several figures linked to the plan. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. Russian president announced ongoing tests and serial production of the Orishnik missile. French President Emmanuel Macron and US President Joe Biden stressed the need to restore peace and security in the Middle East. And the United Nations agencies raised alarm over the escalating humanitarian crisis in Lebanon. That concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.